and this is the beginning of an interview with Elmer Estel at this home at 1612 Saxon Drive in Marion, Indiana. Mr. Estel is 79 years old, having been born on September 26, 1923. My name is Elizabeth Grider, and I'll be the interviewer. Mr. Estel is a family friend. Jean, could you state for the recording what war you were in and what branch of service you served in?
I was in World War II, and as an enlistee, and I was in the Air Force, serving in the 8th Air Force in England.
What was your rank?
I reached the rank of Tech Sergeant.
So you enlisted, correct?
Yes.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living at home with my parents
Where was this at?
in South Adams Street here in Marion, Indiana.
Why did you join?
Everyone my age at the time was either being drafted or enlisted, and I wanted to get in cadets and become a pilot, but they were full, so I just enlisted in the Air Force unattached.
Okay. Do you recall your first days in service?
Oh, yes.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
It was funny. We learned very quickly, and one of the first things we learned is don't volunteer for any duties, because you generally get put on digging or pushing a wheelbarrow. But it was interesting.
So what did it feel like?
Oh, we were 19-year-old, bright-eyed and looking to conquer the world, I guess, and we wasn't smart enough to be scared.
Tell me about a few of your boot camp or training experiences.
Well, I first went through Fort Benjamin Harrison in Indianapolis, and from there to Miami Beach, Florida, for basic training. In Miami Beach, Florida, we went to Laredo, Texas for aerial gunnery school. And from gunnery school, we went to Sioux Falls, South Dakota for radio operator school. From there to Salt Lake City to away to Combat Squadron, and we were assigned to B-17s. Took our first phase flight training in Pecos, Texas, and our second and third phase flight training in Alexandria, Louisiana. From there, we flew overseas, flew the northern route from Goose Bay, Labrador to Ireland, and from there to Bobington, England, where the 381st Bomb Group was, and that was a bomb group that I was attached to for my combat.
Okay. Do you remember your instructors?
Not by name, not really, no.
Okay. How did you get through it?
Well, I was shot down and taken prisoner, and I was a prisoner of war of the Germans for 14 months. And so I was out of combat, but it wasn't too pleasant, but there was a lot of us there, so we got through it.
Okay. Got through it together?
Got through it together, that's right.
What did you feel like when you knew you were going to Europe?
Oh, like everyone that didn't know what we was getting into, we was looking forward to it, and until we got shot at, why we wasn't necessarily scared. But once we got shot at, well, we realized what the war was all about, I guess.
What was it like getting shot at? What was the first shot?
Oh, I don't know. I guess you're scared, of course. But with the training that we had, we learned to live with it. And we were so busy firing back at the German aircraft that I guess we didn't have time to think about it too much.
Where exactly did you go?
Well, when I was captured, the German people captured me right in Cologne, Germany, and Cologne had been bombed rather heavily during the war, and so the people were rather violent. They started to hang me and a couple of the others on the crew, and the army got us away from the civilians, and they put us in a factory and held us until they dispersed the crowd, and then they took us down to a building and they interrogated us rather heavily, and then we were put in solitary for 3 days. and they did more interrogating during these 3 days. And then after that, we were moved around in different spots in Germany. And eventually we ended up in Barth, Germany, which is a town right up on the Baltic Sea across from Norway and Sweden.
Do you know how to spell that?
Barth, Barth, Germany.
Okay.
And that's where we were liberated by the Russian army.
Okay.
And that was in May we actually were liberated May the 1st, and the war was over May the 8th, and we were flown out of that prison camp on May the 13th. And by the way, we were flown out by the same bomb group that we were flying with when we got shot down.
So, how was it like to get shot down? I mean, when you were coming in, when you were arriving, what was it like?
Well, we were under a lot of German aircraft was attacking our plane. We got knocked out of formation. On the mission that I got shot down on, there were 750 heavy bombers sent out on the mission, and we got knocked out of formation and was trying to make it back ourselves. And 13 German fighters hit us right over Cologne, and that's when we got shot down. And we bailed out, and sure, it was scary. Everybody was scared, I guess. And 7 of the 10 of us got hit by enemy air flak, and one of them was dead when he hit the ground. We threw him out of the plane, but his chute opened, and I saw 4 of the rest of the crew. There was a crew of 10, by the way. I saw 4 of the crew after that, and we ended up that 2 of us was in the same prison camp together. So it was exciting, but a little bit scary too.
Definitely. Did you ever come in contact with any European civilians?
Well, when I landed in the streets of Cologne, I certainly did.
How did they react to you?
Well, they were very bitter, and I'm sure we would have been the same way if our cities had been bombed like Cologne had. And like I said earlier, they was ready to hang us. They spit on us and hit us, and I got a cut on my face from somebody hit me. I don't know who it was, of course.
So the civilians were trying to hang
The
you?
civilians were trying to get even with us, I guess you would say.
Yes.
And the German soldiers got us away from the mob and got us inside of this factory and dispersed the crowd.
So did you sustain any injuries?
I broke my leg when I landed in the street, and then I got hit in the neck with a piece of shrapnel. That fortunately it just scratched or just cut a little place on the back of my neck, just enough to bleed.
Okay.
And like I say, then I broke my leg when I landed in the street. And that was about it.
Did the German soldiers take care of your wounds? Did they fix your
No,
wounds?
they gave us of the 4 that was with me when we were captured. They gave us some medical supplies, and the navigator was one of the 4, and he set my leg and did a good job after I got out. Of course, there was x-rays and everything taken, and the medical people in our army, once we were liberated, said that it was a good job, that it wouldn't be necessary to re-break it and reset it. So in that respect, the navigator did a good job, and it used to hurt me a little, especially when it would rain, but other than that, it never gave me too much problem.
So was the navigator, he was the navigator of the plane you
Of
were
the
going in?
B-17 that we were flying on, yes.
Okay. Did he have any doctor experience, or?
Not to my knowledge. Just had a little nerve, I guess, and was forced into the position.
Yeah. Were there many casualties in your unit?
Well, the mission that we were on, of the 700 or so planes, 40% of them never completed the mission, because this mission Liberation was the first daylight raid that the 8th Air Force pulled on Berlin, Germany. And the German army threw up everything they had at the planes, and they knocked down quite a number of them. And yes, there was a lot of casualties. I never did know just how many, but we found out later that about 40% of the 700 planes was shot down. So.
Tell me about a couple of your other most memorable experiences. Do you have any other ones?
Well, I think the day that
Cool.
the
That
day
is-
that we were captured, the day we were shot down, is
Definitely.
one of the big one. And then I guess the next big thing, we were liberated by the Russian army that cut the prison camp off from Germany, and the Germans, being rather scared of the Russians on the way they would be treated, they left and went to the Western Front and surrendered to the Allies, and we were left alone at the prison camp for a few hours before the Russian army got there. And they liberated us, and we was there for, like I say, we were liberated on May the 1st and flown out May the 13th, so we were there about 12 days, kind of under the control of the Russian army, and they saw that we got everything we wanted to eat, and they brought 100 or so cattle in, and some of the prisoners was able to butcher them, and we had fresh meat for the first time in 14 months, and the Russians treated us nice, but they were crazy. I mean, they wasn't a very well disciplined army, but they treated the prisoners good, and then we were flown out, as I said, on May the 13th.
So when they liberated you, did they take you back into their country, or did you stay in Germany?
When we were liberated, like I say, by the Russians, and then when the 8th Air Force came in and flew us out, they flew us from there into Reims, France, and then we was there for a few days until we got new uniforms, and they fed us up a little because all of us had lost a lot of weight, and then we boarded a ship in Le Havre, France, and came home, and it took us 6 days to get home. And we flew overseas when we went over, and it took us 12 hours to go over and 6 days to come home, which I
Wow.
always remembered. And then I was in the States for about 5 months, and then I was discharged in the end of November in 1945.
Okay. Do you want to tell me about any of your other experiences while you were in captivity?
Oh, not really. There wasn't. We took care of our own camp, and we was always scared of some type of sickness going around, and we tried to keep as clean as possible, and we walked around the compound of an evening for exercise, and the YMCA got us some sports equipment, and after most of our injuries started healing, well, we started playing basketball and softball in the camp. The Germans would let us do that, and we kind of organized our own recreation. And I was with a couple of well-known people in prison camp that I made good friends with. One was an umpire in the Major League Baseball, or he became an umpire in the Major League Baseball, and another one that I was good friends with played for the University of Kentucky, and they went to the Olympics and played on the Indianapolis Olympian professional basketball team. That he and I were good friends.
That's incredible.
But we didn't get much to eat in the 14 months I was in there, but by the same token, the Germans wasn't getting that much to eat either.
Okay.
We'd get one meal a day, and it would either be dehydrated soup or boiled potatoes. And then we did get some Red Cross parcels, and we would split that, and then we would trade something in the parcel if it was something we didn't like. We could always find someone that liked that, and we'd trade that for something in their parcel.
Mhm.
And there was always 5 packs of cigarettes in each Red Cross parcel. And even though some of us didn't smoke, we used to play cards, and we'd use the cigarettes for chips to bet in the games we'd play. And cigarettes would get so dry that you'd have to roll the ends of them so the tobacco wouldn't fall out of them. And we used to, some of the things we used to do to entertain ourselves, we'd make little boats, and then when it would rain and there'd be puddles of water, and we'd pull the boats through the water like little kids, you know. And we kept ourselves entertained, and everyone tried to escape at least one time, and as far as I know, there was only 2 people that ever made it that we ever heard got out. But most of the rest of us, we'd try to escape, but we'd get captured before we got very far. So that's about it.
When you tried to escape, how did they react?
Well, they put us in solitary. I was in solitary for a week. I didn't even get out of the camp. There was 3 of us that tried to go, and they put us in solitary confinement. And I was there for 7 days, and a cell about 6 by 8 feet, nothing on the floor but just a little straw mattress, and got pretty boring. But other than that, well, that's about it.
Did they feed you while you're in solitary?
Just the 1 meal a day. They would slide it through the hole in the door.
Okay.
And like I say, it was either dehydrated soup or boiled potatoes. One time we got meat, and they told us later that it was dog meat. Whether it was or not, I don't know. But we didn't know it when we ate it. But I will say this: when you're hungry, you'll eat anything just about. And most of the time we were hungry. So that's it.
How many soldiers that went down with you, do you remember them being with you the whole time?
Of the 10 that was on the crew, as I say, 1 was killed. He was dead when he hit the ground. And then the officer was taken to the officers' camp up in Barth, and the enlisted men went the other way, and I was with 4 of the enlisted men, and of course 1 got killed, and we never did know where the 6th enlisted man was. See, there's 4 officers and 6 enlisted men on a B-17 crew, and we never did know where the 6th enlisted man was, although we did hear that he was alive. And then they moved us around. First they put us on rail cars and moved us up across Germany up into East Prussia, and they kept us up there for about 3 or 4 months, and the Russian army started advancing, and then they had to move us, so they put us in the hull of a boat and moved us down the Baltic Sea to Stettin, Germany. And we were there about 4 months, and then the Russians was advancing on that area, and they moved us out of there, and that's when they moved us up to Barth and put a bunch of enlisted men in the officers' camp up there, and we spent the last 5 or 6 months up there before we was liberated by the Russian army.
Okay. Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, I got the Air Medal, Purple Heart, and Good Conduct Medal. I don't know why. And European Theater of Operations.
How did you get the Purple Heart?
That was by getting hit in the neck with flak and breaking my leg when I parachuted out.
How did you stay in touch with your family? Were you able to stay in touch with your family?
We were able to write form letters that we were given through the Red Cross, and also we would receive a form letter from our parents, but most of the time half of it was blocked out or blacked out, and same way the letters that we sent out of the camp sent home. A lot of times it's basically, hello, how are you? I'm fine. I love you, bye. and the rest of it would have been blocked out. So they were all being censored. The ones going out, of course, was censored by the Germans, and the ones that our parents wrote to us was censored by the U.S. government before they would let it be mailed. And so we didn't get too much news, just enough to know that let them know that we was alive, and that was about it.
Well, did you have plenty of supplies before you were shut down? I mean,
Have what, hon?
plenty of supplies.
Oh, we had, the training was tremendous, and we had the best of everything as far as equipment and the artillery that we had on the plane. And of course, the B-17 at that time was the best aircraft in the world, and everything was the best, you know, nothing second rate. So we had no complaints from that standpoint.
Did you feel any enormous pressure or stress throughout the whole time you were in the
Yeah,
war?
yeah. You know, you get a taste, I guess, of what prison's like to be in a prison camp, because it was probably about the same way as being in prison, although I think it was more, well, there's more uncertainty and distress, I guess you'd say. There was a couple of times that we never thought we'd ever get out, but most of the time we were always optimistic that the war would be over and we could get to go home. But a couple of times, like I say, for a day or two, the Germans treated us pretty rough, and we thought maybe that, you know, the war wasn't going in our direction, and we didn't think we'd ever get out.
Would you be willing to tell about some of the interrogations?
Pardon?
Would you be willing to tell about some of the interrogations?
Oh, there's really not that much to tell. The main thing that they tried to find out was they knew the aircraft, the type of aircraft we were flying. They tried to find out where we were stationed in England, and how many aircraft was involved, and things of this nature. We didn't know that information. I mean, we knew what kind of plane we was flying on, and we could have told them where we were stationed, but we were instructed to tell them only name, rank, and serial number. And they always threatened us that, you know, if we didn't give them the information, why we would never see our folks again, and, you know, different threats of this nature. But we'd been trained very completely along those lines, and we knew what, or at least we thought we knew what they would do. They would threaten us, and then after we told them our name, rank, and serial number a number of times, they'd kind of give up and not bother us anymore as far as interrogation is concerned, which basically they did that. I mean, the uncertainty in it was a little nerve-wracking, but things went pretty much like we had been trained to believe that it would go when we were in training. Not too many surprises along those lines.
Did they ever use force?
Not on me personally. The only thing they did along those lines is just the solitary that we was in. But some of the Jewish boys that was in there, yes, they did beat them, and they did treat them worse than they did the other soldiers in there. And if you didn't create too much problem, they didn't do too much to you. They kind of left you alone. We most of the time we had elected what we called a camp leader, one of our prisoners, and when we stood roll call, which we had to do twice a day, if we wanted anything from the Germans, our camp leader would go to the German officers and ask whether we got it or not. He'd still ask. And then in most cases, the German command if they had orders for the whole prison camp, they would give to our elected leader, and he in turn would pass it out. We kind of had our own form of government in there that the Germans most of the time respected, and they worked through that format, and it worked pretty good.
Did you know German, or how did you communicate with the Germans?
Most of the Germans could speak English. Of course, when you're around as many prisoners as we were, there's always some that can speak German. They always had guards walking around through the camp all during the day, and they would try to listen in on our conversations and things of this nature, spying, to try to find out things, and they can speak English. Some of them would pretend they couldn't, but most of the time they were rather open with us, and we was fortunate enough a couple times that we bribed the German guard, and he would sneak news in for us, so that way we'd give him some cigarettes, and in turn he'd bring news in on how the war was going. And of course, with that and with the new prisoners coming in on a weekly basis almost, we pretty much kept abreast on how the war was going. But once we were in the prison camp, they pretty much left us alone. I think in the 14 months that I was in prison camp, there was 7 soldiers killed by the German guards, and a couple of them went out of their head and ran up to the warning wire and started climbing over it, which they knew if they had been in the right mind, they knew that they couldn't get out, but they were shot, and then one was shot just for jumping out the window. He was sitting in the window, and instead of getting down off the window and going out the door, he just jumped out the window, and they shot him. But I think there was a total of about 7 that were shot. That was all.
Were there any entertainers that you can remember?
Oh, we had shows of some of the prisoners that were talented. You know, we had put on a couple of shows, and then there's some that could sing, but really not that much. They used to lock us up pretty early in the afternoon, especially in the winter time, and then they'd put shutters over the windows, and we didn't have them turn the lights off, and we'd sit and there's always someone that could tell jokes or tell stories or something that entertained us. And one that I always remember from Cy Reed from Happy, Texas, I think was the best storyteller I ever heard. And every night he'd tell stories, and I think he kept telling stories until no one was laughing, and he'd realize we was all asleep, and he'd shut up and go to sleep himself. But other than that, there wasn't that much formal showing of any kind. You know, a couple times they put on a little show, and then the Germans let us stay unlocked on Christmas Eve in 1944, that we could go between barracks during the night, and that was the only time that they left the doors unlocked. So that was about it.
Did you ever do anything for good luck?
No, not really. Just kept my mouth shut and didn't argue with the Germans if they told me to do something. I guess was about all.
Okay.
But no, I never carried a rabbit's foot.
Did you remember anyone who did, or had any unusual good luck?
Not really. Society was so much different then than it is now. In all the time that I was in prison camp, I never knew of anything being stolen or taken by another prisoner. We had no way of locking anything up, like the food that we got through the Red Cross, so we didn't eat immediately, and we didn't always eat. We would save it and spread it out over a period of days. I don't ever remember anything being stolen. I don't ever remember any of the prisoners getting in a fight with one another, because we knew that we were all in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing off color that I ever knew of or heard of in the 14 months. And that, in this day and age with our society like it is today, that's rather unusual. But I think everyone realized that we were in the same boat, and we kind of
All had to stick together.
had to stick together, and we chose to stick together. And of course, we didn't want to give the Germans any reason to think that there was any problems, or that we wasn't going to cause any problem within our own ranks. So,
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
oh yeah, I could sit here for hours and tell you that, especially Cy Reed,
How do you spell his name?
C-Y, Cy, and R-E-E-D.
Okay.
And I always remember he was General Patton was a favorite of his, and as we'd be walking around the compound, and I don't know, did you ever see a movie of prison camp with the guard towers around it,
Yes.
like in Hogan's Heroes?
Mhm.
And believe me, prison camp wasn't like Hogan. But anyway, we would be walking around there, and we'd get close to one of these guard towers, and you couldn't make motions at them. Walking around the compound, as I said, and Cy would throw his head back and say, "Come on, blood and guts." And General Patton, his nickname was Blood and Guts. And
Wow.
he would do that just, he thought he was annoying the German guards that would be up in the tower. And as long as he didn't make any motion or anything, they wasn't going to do anything. If he'd have made a motion or something, well, they'd have maybe shot at us or something. But that was always funny. Everyone always got a kick out of that. And then apparently General Patton gave Dinah Shore one of his favorite revolvers that he carried at all times. And after that, Cy Reed said he was mad at him for giving one of his guns away to Dinah Shore, but just in a kidding way. But that was funny. And then we'd always pull tricks on different ones, short sheet 'em or something like that. But
Mhm.
nothing that was dangerous. Yeah.
So short sheets, was there any other pranks you would pull?
Oh yeah, this Cy Reed was very very goosey. You know, he hit him in the ribs, and he'd say things. One time we were studying roll call, and the Germans would come by and count each barracks, and they would when they would start, we would have to snap to attention, and then they would count, and then they'd tally up and see if they agreed. And there's generally in a barracks about 200 prisoners. And the one time I was standing in back of Cy Reed, and as they're standing there getting ready to tally up, I reached up and hit him in the ribs and said Heil Hitler real close. And he threw up his hand like a German and said Heil Hitler. And just automatically one of the German guards returned a salute. And then everybody laughed, and of course they didn't think it was funny, and they took him out and put him in solitary for 3 days. and there was a lot of horseplay like that. But,
Do you have any photographs?
no, I've got a sheet that the German record that they kept on us. It's got my photograph. Where is that? See if that isn't in the bottom where I keep my socks. You know that orange sheet that's folded? That's the only one that I would have from within the camp.
Okay. Do you have any other photographs?
Only the ones that we looked at a minute ago that we have some.
Who are the people in the photographs besides yourself?
Who are the other people? The one picture that we saw, one was on my crew. that was in prison camp with me, and the other person was in our radio operator school that was a good friend of mine.
Okay. What did you think of officers or your other fellow soldiers?
Well, you become very close to, and most of the time we were with all enlisted men
Mm-hmm.
until we were moved up to Barth, Germany with the officers. And once we were moved into the officers' camp, we respected them as officers and we saluted them just like we did before we were in prison camp. It's still a military courtesy was shown to the officer there, and there was some famous pilots in the prison camp up there that had been shot down. Colonel Francis S. Cabreski, who was well known for years,
Yeah.
and Colonel Zemke, and these were, Colonel Cabreski and Colonel Zemke both were aces of the ETO, which is European Theater of Operation. And so we showed them the courtesy that any officer received, in the regular military.
Did you keep a diary?
No.
No? Were you allowed to keep any of your personal belongings?
No.
No?
No.
Do you recall the day that your service ended?
Oh yes, when we were liberated from prison camp, and once we got back in the States, I went on what they call R&R to Miami Beach, Florida for 30 days, and then they sent me to Bearfield, Fort Wayne, and that's where I was discharged up there, and that happened in early part of December 1945.
Well, what'd you do on the day you were discharged?
Just got in the car and came back to Marion, and that was on Thursday, and on Monday morning I went to work.
Oh, really?
And I went back to, I had been working before I went in service because I knew that when I went in it, I couldn't go to college because of the war. But then when I got out on Thursday, I went back to work on Monday, and I worked there for 3 months and quit to go to college.
Wow.
So I didn't take any time off after I got out.
So after work, you did go back to school?
Yes.
Where did you work when you came home?
I worked at the Illinois Glass Company in Cass City, Indiana.
Where did you go back to school?
Why?
No, where?
Where I went to Ball State in Muncie for 1 year, and then I dropped out of there and I went to Indiana Business College and finished the course there.
Was your education supported by the GI Bill?
Yes.
Do you continue any of the relationships that you started when you were in the service?
No, not really, and I'm sorry of that, especially the crew that I trained with. I should have kept in contact with them, but time passes and scattered out all over the world, I guess, and I just failed to keep up with them.
Did you join a veterans organization?
I belong to the ex-prisoners of war as well as the American Legion.
Okay. What did you go on to do as a career after the war?
I played a lot of softball around the area, and but as far as making a living, I worked at a couple, 3 jobs, but I ended up working for RCA, and I was in management for 33 years at RCA until I retired.
Do you do anything now after your retirement?
Oh, we drive cars for the Cadillac dealership here in Marion a couple of days a week, take them to auctions or dealer trades, but other than that, I enjoy my lovely wife and her company.
Okay. Would you mind stating your wife's name?
Rosemary Estel.
Okay. Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I'm pro-military and very proud of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think any young person that doesn't really know what they want to do if they go into school, such as a profession or something, I think they could do much worse than to join the military and make a career out of it. not only is it, it's good training, you get a good education, and if you serve your 20 years in the military and you can retire with a nice pension, and there's no place in the world that you can work for 20 years and retire like you can from the military. Plus, I think the military has a tendency to make young people grow up.
Mhm. When did you get married to your wife?
April the 16th, 1951. 51 years ago.
Okay.
All my life, I think.
Okay. What kind of activities does your veterans organization have?
They have meetings, the ex-prisoners of war, and each year the Veterans Administration recognizes all former prisoners of war, and they have a little meeting
Mhm.
and luncheon and speakers, and then once a year in Indianapolis, they also recognize former prisoners of war there, and generally some ranking military person gives a talk, and some state politician generally. That's about it.
Do you attend those regularly?
Some, not all.
Okay. How did your service and your experiences affect your life?
Well, I think it makes me appreciate the country we live in.
Mhm.
I think it helped me respect people more. I guess really going into the age that I did, it helped me grow up rather rapidly. And as I say, I'm very pro-military. I don't like war. I think there's times that it's a necessary evil. But I believe if we get in a war, that every citizen in this country should support this country, and the ones that don't support this country ought to get out. Now, if that classifies me as a radical, then I guess you'd have to call me a radical. But
Okay.
I am against war, other than at times when they're necessary evils.
Mhm. Did World War II, change your perspectives on life? Do you remember what you thought about before you went into the war and after you came out of it? How it changed your perspective?
Oh, I don't know. I guess the friendships that I made and the experiences that I went through, I think maybe it highlighted how important life is a little more than it would have otherwise.
Mhm.
I'm not sure that my life after service was patterned after anything that I encountered in the war. I still have a lot of memories, mostly good. There's times that I guess that I have nightmares because of it, but I don't think that's too unusual with a lot of people. But I think it made me grow up, basically, but I'm not sure it made. I'd like to think that I would have changed otherwise, but I don't know about that.
Is there anything else that you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
No, not really, Elizabeth. I appreciate you doing this. I've thought at times that I would appreciate someone recording my story, I guess you would say, for someone to read maybe years on down the road when I'm no longer around. But no, I can't think of anything else that I would add. I was happy to be able to do this with you, and I hope that it's what you're looking for. And if you don't get an A on this, then I'm going to turn you across my knee after you get your grade. So that's it, hon.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your recollections with us and with me
You're quite welcome.
and with the rest of this country.
You're quite welcome.